everyone, welcome to the next episode of Smashified. I am Omni, and I am joined by Chris.
Hey!
It's just Chris today.
It's just
we
us.
were not able to procure a Mykal, so he's the one who did the music for this episode, but he was not available. He's been at a con, so he's not available right now. But we're going to go ahead and do this now because this is something that we've been working on for a while.
Yep.
And it's about time we finished it because it was supposed to be done like earlier this month. So, better late than never, I suppose.
Well, it's funny because I believe we started working on this in January, early January.
Yeah.
As we've said in past videos, there's been a handful of characters that we've sort of been kind of working on over the course of the entire Smashified series, and this just happens to be one of them because it's Geno. It's good to see him here.
Yeah, so if you're not aware, in Smash 4 there is a Mii costume of Geno. I might as well address the elephant in the room. And obviously, a Mii costume is not necessarily representative of what the character might look like if it was actually officially included in the roster. I think it's evident with things like the transition from Little Mac from Brawl to Little Mac in Smash 4. Not quite the same comparison, but I think there's a correlation there. And so, obviously, with something like a Mii costume, you're looking at something where they have to conform the proportions of the body to the Mii general body shape, just because every single Mii costume has to have the same proportions. And so that's a limitation that we tried to overcome with this particular design.
That's totally true, and I think also on top of that, they sort of try to make it look like a costume, not like the actual character would. Like, it looks as if this Mii character is in a Halloween costume of Geno, you know? I don't think it's Geno, by any means.
Right, yeah. And, of course, you could just, like, slap a real Geno head into the Mii costume body, and it would look pretty okay. But, I feel like the Mii costume doesn't quite... I feel like the Mii costume... Hey, man, don't disrespect.
I'm not. I love that guy.
But yeah, I think the Mii costume has some liberties with the character design that we wanted to sort of bring it back a little bit to the original design, which...
You and I are pretty big fans of Mario RPG and Geno in general, right? At least...
Yeah, I mean, so I did a Geno for Brawl back in the day. Mm-hmm. I don't know if any of you who remember me from like Smash boards and things like that, but I did one of those in Photoshop, and this looks a lot better. So
I remember when you posted that too, and I was like, whoa, nothing could be better than this.
Right.
Oh, it was so cool. Yeah, he had like the golden instead of the patch on his head, he had an actual like golden, I don't know, nugget or something. It was great. It was great. Brawl days.
Yeah, and it had like, oh man, well, there was some of the same ideas were carried over into this particular iteration. Mm-hmm. I'm the one who did like the character design in this one. Obviously, we don't have a recording of the actual model sheet being created, but that was my baby, and I took a lot of pride in making sure that this really represents how Geno looks in the original game, in the official art, as well as the sprites. It's hard to kind of reconcile those two things, but I tried my best. I think we ended up with a pretty good result.
Yeah, no, I definitely think so. It was fun thinking about functionality and thinking of him as an actual puppet that had been, you know, enlarged in a way. It was fun because that transfers in texture, that transfers in like something you added sort of last moment, which was the screws that were in his little joints.
We'll talk about that. Yeah, but like things like mechanisms and how the joints would move. I actually referenced a Figma figure of Link that I have, the Skyward Sword Link. You might be familiar with it, but I was like looking at it. It's a very well articulated figure, and so I was looking at like how did they do certain things, and so I looked at that, tried to carry over as many of those mechanisms as I could without, you know, making it feel too action figure-y. But also looking at the Mii costume, they kind of did some of the same stuff, but I wanted to take it a step further and see how it could look. And I think it kind of feels like if they made a next gen Mario RPG, like how would they have revised Geno's design over the years, like looking at Mario from SMRPG to now, how has he changed, and how could those same kind of principles be applied to Geno's design, maybe with some proportion changes, slight proportion changes, like really small things, not like a character overhaul like Spyro and Skylanders or something like that, but you know, those kind of things, like that natural evolution. And not to the degree that Sakurai did with Pit, you know, like turning him into a crazy anime character, you know?
Yeah, you see it all the time, and I feel like a lot of artists in general just don't see the value in this almost one-to-one verbatim interpretation of a character. Like, whenever a redesign, if you will, happens, it usually is an overhaul like that, like the pit example you were talking about. So I think that there's value in sort of understanding what the original design was and not trying to fill the gaps where you don't have to, quite frankly. I mean, here we filled gaps, but that's because it was to make sense of how the mechanics work behind the character, not because we were like, oh, this will look cooler, you know?
Yeah, and like a lot of things would overhaul a character design to the point where there was nothing functional about what changed. It was just a change for the sake of change, or making it feel more quote unquote modern. And so I don't like those kind of changes, like the Crash Bandicoot design from like Crash at the Titans, you know, that like why does he now have tribal tattoos, things like that, you know? It's not necessary. I like subtle redesigns. That's why Mario feels so right still, even 30 years down the road. It's because they never tried to reinvent Mario. They just let him evolve gradually over time. And I think that's how you kind of have to think of those types of redesigns for a character, where you're trying to fake that gradual evolution. So that's sort of my thought process behind that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, totally. It is great now that you mention it, Mario, because he has had a lot of changes over the years, like probably more than any character, but they're so subtle. It's all just shape changes. It's not design choices, you know? And I think Geno could sort of follow that in suit. It's funny watching this process too, because there was a lot of learning that happened. Because as I said, we started this in January, so there was design choices that changed. There were just processes that changed, and all in all, I love this. I love that I wish I could do this in ZBrush. I don't know if I can, but I love that you just mark down where you want to paint your texture and it's already on the texture map. Great tool.
So basically what I was doing there is you can kind of like project the brush stroke all the way through the model, so that you don't have to because if you think of how you create something out of wood, you get it from a tree, and the tree has rings, and that's where the wood grain comes from. But each of those wood grains is actually just like a cross section of those circular rings, just stretched out through the length of the tree. So I was trying to figure out how to make that look continuous and seamless. And I just came up with the silly idea of just projecting those strokes through and making marks, and then tweaking it from there. And I actually did a lot more Blender painting than I've ever done. Started getting really chummy with the brushes and all that. So that was fun.
Yeah. That too is an interesting part that just was on the screen for a second, because in one of the earlier interpretations of the head that I had modeled, I guess teardrop eye rings that are on Geno's face that he's so known for. Originally, we made them just circle around the entire sphere
all the way
of the
to the
head, to the back, and back to the bottom. But then looking at the I guess it's artwork for the game, right? It's like a 3D render that was done way back in the day.
A really weird looking 3D render.
Yeah, totally weird. You notice that they seem to those lines sort of pool towards the top and the bottom.
Yeah, they sort of converge, kind of like longitudinal lines on the globe, the way they go from pole to pole.
Yeah.
So we changed that up, and then now we're just doing some texture revisions.
You really can't say we don't scrutinize every single design choice.
I was on Twitter, questioning my life about this character. Oh gosh, everything looks wrong.
Oh no.
Change everything.
Yeah, well there were a lot of last minute changes. There was that, and then with the cape too. You were thinking about it, right? And you're saying to me that it should be shorter. And I was like, really? I mean, it looked good, but... And then when you mentioned it and you did the change really quickly, just looking at that original Super Mario RPG weird render next to ours, I was like, yeah, no, it makes sense. This cape, if he's going to be moving his arms, it can't be he can't be pushing it back, right? Too much. Just made sense for, again, the sort of way things work, the mechanical side of it.
Yeah, and if you were to put this character in Smash, which they sort of have done with the Mii costume, they actually did do the cape sort of short, and the cape kind of weirdly deforms when the arms move. And so I was trying to figure out how can you alleviate some of those weird deformations with the character design.
It's a weird cape, man. It's a stiff one. It's not like the Vati one we just did on our last episode that's super dynamic and blowy. This one's meant to stay strong.
If you think of like Lego capes, like how they're just a tiny piece of cloth, it's not a lot of like the tensile strength proportional to the amount of cape there is. You can't like can't blow the Lego cape in the wind. It's just like, it's basically a piece of paper. So this sort of cape would probably be pretty stiff. But now we're posing. Yes.
But it's funny to think about because it would be stiff. You're right, on a puppet. And puppets, because they're smaller and their materials, I guess, more coarse and thick and won't bend as much. But Geno's been made enlarged by this magic wish, right? So is his material still going to bend like that? Yeah, I guess it would, because it would still be the same thickness, the same. Right?
Philosophical questions, man. I'm not ready for this. Okay. Like, did the proportions grow when he did? Did he grow? How much did he grow? It's sort of weird because, like, did he start as a little tiny doll? I don't know. Who knows?
I just want to bring up real quick one thing. I just remembered when we first started working on this. I remember you were pretty adamant about wanting to show how crazy this guy is, right? Because he's got like his fingers, he transforms a ton, but we wound up just sort of keeping his regular design instead of his like gun fingers or whatever. The dude becomes a cannon at one point.
Yeah, he turns into a cannon, his whole body. There's no way to make a character design do that.
Transformers, man.
Yeah, who knows?
Awesome.
But yeah, that's it. That's it for this episode. So thank you so much for watching it, and be sure to follow everyone who worked on it on social media. The links to those are in the description. And a huge thank you to our patrons, as usual, for helping to make these episodes possible. And if you'd like to support Smashified and get some cool rewards, you can do that on our Patreon page, so consider backing us there.
There's a lot of bonus Geno content there right now, I promise you.
And also, check out our Gumroad page. There's going to be more stuff coming to that pretty soon. So I guess that's pretty much it. Yeah. So until the next episode, guys, I'll see you later.
Woo.